Good morning, everybody. Dr. Vasquez here, coming to you live as I always try to do. Right now, what I'm going to do in this brief and spontaneous video is explain to you the difference between my two kind of newsletters or blogs or websites. One of which is called HealthyThinking.substack.com. That was my first kind of attempt to get out of Facebook and LinkedIn and all those other social media channels, which for many of us became basically worthless because they were censoring basically anything of importance that we said, So if I talked about, on those platforms, if I talked about vitamin D, I got blocked. If I talked about using probiotics to reduce systemic inflammation and improve immunity, I got blocked. So again, as many of us learned at the start of the globalist pandemic, we couldn't talk about things anymore, even with our levels of expertise. I've got 3 doctorate degrees. I've published in tons of major medical journals, clinical trials with vitamin D in journals like British Medical Journal. I published a short letter in Journal of the American Medical Association, Annals of Pharmacology, Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism, arguably the biggest, endocrinology journal. And then I was getting blocked even talking about vitamin D. So again, that's why I started posting my information on Substack. And again, the first page that I started with was called Healthy Thinking, kind of spontaneously named, but I want to distinguish that one from Inflammation Mastery. And I see I've got a copy of the book right next to me, but it's a little bit out of reach. Maybe I'll pick it up in just a moment. But in HealthyThinking.substack.com, I basically talk about everything. I talk about clinical information. I talk about my social perspectives. You can agree or disagree, but at least you're getting a perspective. And I talk about some of my life experiences, whether it's business. I do talk quite a bit about, I talk about psychology and philosophy because those are my pet projects. Anybody who knows me knows that I love reading philosophy in general, but especially Nietzsche. Nietzsche just flows really well, whether it's in English or Spanish, or whether we're talking about the famous Walter Kaufman translations or the better Hollingdale translations. So again, on HealthyThinking.substack.com, I talk about philosophy, architecture, psychology, and I talk about business as well because, like I've said in other blogs, maybe you've seen them, and other videos, everyone is a business. You are a business, especially if you're a clinician, you're obviously a business. But even if you're, retired or, that's not a great example, but even if you're employed, let's say, you're still a business. Even if you don't think of yourself as a business, you have to provide a service, you have to have income, you have to have a budget, and you have to save your money. So, that's what any business does. And as I have mentioned in some videos, even recently, one of the weaknesses that I saw when I was growing up, like in my early 20s, I was aware that I wanted to learn more about how society functions and how people function. And so that's why I started studying psychology and philosophy again in my early 20s. And I joined men's groups and I saw a really great psychotherapist in Seattle, Washington. And then later, even though I only saw her 2 or 3 times, Catherine Foster in Fort Worth, Texas. She was amazing. So anyway, I've had obviously a lot of experience in studying health, medicine, nutrition, functional medicine, and teaching those topics as well. But I also have a lot of life experience outside of that, some of which was kind of accidental, so to speak, just like we all have to, sometimes get the experience first and then get the lesson after. But sometimes I've, actively tried to understand my experiences, especially with people and especially with manipulative people and especially in business, So I have done I've done a lot of things in those regards quite well. I've tried to understand people. I've tried to look for red flags and yellow flags and the balance between yellow flags and green flags. And should I spend time with this person or should I sign this contract? I've done a lot of videos on that because whether I like it or not, my life involves those topics. Working with accountants, working with attorneys, signing documents, and working with people who I've known or have been in our family business for 40 years, So, and that doesn't make it great. So, but that's part of the point. That's part of what I had to learn from that experience. So, just because it's a family business, and hey, I knew your mom, and hey, I've known your dad, and I knew your parents before you were even born, and we're family, and you can rely on me. When it comes to contracts and money, sometimes all that stuff just goes out the window really fast. And so again, I did a spontaneous video back in 2022 exactly on that topic, that when and it doesn't really matter like the level of the contract. So it could be a couple of $100 and I've had problems at that level. It could be a couple of $1,000 and I've had problems at that level. But when you start talking about millions of dollars with people, they're going to bullshit you every which way they can because, hey, you're my family. Hey, I knew your mom. Hey, I knew your dad before you even got married, before you were even on the way. Believe me, I've heard it all. And so, those are shocking experiences. And with those, the two extremes that we have with those types of life experiences and others that are similar, anything hard and difficult and unexpected and shocking, we can either have the experience and be so hurt by it that we just want to ignore it. It's like, fuck it, I'm going to drink a beer and play video games and go on vacation and get over it. Or that's not even really getting over it, that's just ignoring it. Or the other extreme, which you would expect is the one that I take, is to analyze it and try to figure it out and look up books and videos and try to understand what the hell happened, especially in situations like what happened to me recently, which I talked about in some videos over the past weekend. So I did a video on Friday night. I called it Friday Night Videos for those of you who grew up in Generation X. Friday Night Videos used to be like the MTV that was free. So when videos became popular in the 80s, for people who didn't have cable television and music television, MTV, we got Friday Night Videos that came on at midnight, and that's how we got to see, we got to actually see the new music. So I call it Friday Night Videos for that reason. The other thing that happened, growing up in Generation X in the 70s and 80s is that we watched Saturday morning cartoons. So I did a video Saturday morning and I called it Saturday Morning Video because it really wasn't a cartoon. And then I did another video yesterday to kind of summarize some of my recent perspectives and insights. And a big part of that was talking about business. Because again, we all function with some level of rationality and competence. And then we, of course, try to advance that. But in my case, for example, I've tried to figure this stuff out. I studied it. I studied manipulative people. I've done videos on how to sign contracts or not sign contracts. And this guy still bamboozled me. So, I had a really great week last week, despite we're doing some construction and I got bamboozled by this guy for a couple $1,000. But I'm at peace with it. I had a good week. Overall, my life is pretty good. So yeah, that's just what happened. But I still have to learn from it. I can't just say, damn it, this guy ripped me off and he's an idiot and he's a whatever he is. If I put all the blame on him, then that actually disempowers me. So that's the paradox of blaming other people, right? Blaming other people feels righteous and it feels real good in the moment because I can say, oh, this guy is incompetent. He's just a trickster. He can't do the job, so he's just complicating it to charge me more, and then we're not doing anything, so the whole thing's just going to hell. I can totally say that. But if that's all that I say, then I deprive myself of the exercise of figuring out, what am I going to do different next time? Even if it is all his fault, what am I going to do different next time? I have to change me to, no matter how bad it was on the other person's side, or no matter how guilty they are, or how I want to feel righteous, I have to look at it and see, what am I going to do differently, And so if you take the time to look at the videos that I did on Friday, starting with that video, you'll see I'm kind of wrestling with this. Like, how did this happen? Like, I've studied business a little bit. I've studied my own experience. I've studied manipulative people. I know how to look for yellow flags and red flags and green flags. And so how did this happen? And the insight that I came up with either Saturday morning or Sunday is that it wasn't about that. Was he a manipulative person? In my opinion, yes. That's my perspective. I'm sure he thinks he's a great businessman, but that's what people think when they're making money and not providing a service. They say, oh, well, I just made thousands of dollars for doing nothing. Yeah, but that's not business. That's just ripping people off. So I'm sure that he thinks he's a great businessman. Even though, I paid thousands of dollars for 4 jobs and 7 weeks later, we got nothing to show for it. So that's not being a good businessman. That's just ripping people off. And I'm sure that happens. It happens in business. It happens in politics. People make big promises. They don't have the, anybody can make a big promise. That doesn't require competence or intelligence or knowledge of the field, so to speak. But making a big promise and then delivering on that requires competence, integrity, discipline, organization, a bunch of other skills. That's a different skill set. Big promises is kind of an empty skill set. Anybody could do that. Anybody by the time they're 10 years old can make big promises. But to really deliver on a big project on an international level, that not everybody can do that. And we found out that this guy could make big promises and he couldn't deliver. But again, I had to look at that from a psychology standpoint. I was like, but I've studied manipulative people. How did I get manipulated by this? And then part two was what? Part two was looking at the contract and looking for, looking at it from kind of a legal standpoint in the contract and who's going to do what and who has what responsibility. But I didn't make the mistake there either. I didn't make the mistake in not reading him at the start. I mean, obviously, later everything becomes obvious. That's not where I made the mistake. I didn't make the mistake from a strategic standpoint. I needed this job done or this group of jobs done. I had to hire somebody to do the job. I was doing the right thing by advancing on that project. But where I made the mistake was in part three. And that's what I talk about in the video that I did Saturday morning. And I think I talked about it again yesterday in the video I did Sunday morning. So again, that's an example of the distinction between HealthyThinking.substack.com, where I talk about everything that I think has value. And that could be architecture, it could be life experience, it could be distinguished, it could be, drawing an analogy between so-called modern medicine and so-called modern architecture. So I did a video spontaneously on that topic. I think that was back in 23, it could have been 24. I was in Miami at the time, I'm trying to remember the date, but I think it was in end of 23. But if you enjoy, looking at things from kind of a complex polymath, if I may say so, perspective, like how does modern architecture set us up for modern medicine, and how does the medical paradigm parallel itself in the buildings that we see, in the infrastructure that we either have or do not have? I mean, if you're interested in conversations like that, I talk about those things mostly at the website HealthyThinking.substack.com. It's where I talk about basically everything. And again, InflammationMastery.substack.com is mostly dedicated to clinical topics, and I try to keep it mostly apolitical. And I'm going to talk about that again in just a moment. I try to keep it apolitical. It's not so much about health tips, and it's just mostly for the clinicians. For the most part, I do my best there, and I try to not put too much political information in there. But for all of you purists out there who don't want to talk about politics, or you say, oh, well, you should keep your opinions to yourself. I mean, I do keep my opinions to myself. They're both my pages. I can talk about whatever I want, but I keep it mostly on healthy thinking. One of the things I learned actually from one of my mentors in naturopathic medical school. So I graduated from Bastyr University in Seattle in 1999. And one of my clinical mentors in the final years was Patrick Donovan, a really great clinician. He was a nurse before he became an ND, and just a really great clinician. And so even though I graduated in 99, I was talking with him in 2014. And at that time, that was when, some of you may remember, but maybe not because it just gets lost in the shuffle. In 2014 was a time when we were having a bunch of riots in the United States because the police had killed an unarmed citizen. And so I was in the US at that time doing a series of conferences, flying coast to coast, talking about dysbiosis and autoimmunity. And in one of the social media platforms, I was talking with Patrick Donovan. And I said, I can't believe how I'm wasting so much time looking at this social stuff when I need to be focused in on nutrition and health and medicine and functional medicine. And he replied to me something to the effect, he said, what could possibly be more important than this right now? Your country is in a state of basically rioting because of the political situation, and that's all he said. But he said in another sense, he said, don't criticize yourself for using your doctor time to understand society, because that's part of health as well. And that's a very naturopathic perspective, everything being integrated. That's always been part of the naturopathic perspective. Now it's of course included within functional medicine. And obviously I talk about it. It's even on the cover of the book of Inflammation Mastery. So, a strict clinician who wants to have kind of tunnel vision and blinders can say, oh, well, you should only talk about biomedicine and nutrition and functional medicine and mitochondria and microbiome. That's fine. I try to do that. But every once in a while, I'm certainly free to talk about political issues when they become important and when they become especially health related, Like, for example, I posted recently quoting the British Medical Journal from 2000, I think it was relatively recent, 2013, I believe, because the British Medical Journal had published an article reviewing the lethality of so-called non-lethal weapons, like rubber bullets, pepper balls, and all these kinds of things like that, which are now being used in the United States against American citizens. So that's something that you didn't learn in medical school, and that's something you didn't learn in chiropractic college, and that's something they never talked about in naturopathic medical school. And yeah, it's medically relevant to talk about the injuries and the lethality of so-called non-lethal weapons, because when your government tells you, oh, well, we were using non-lethal weapons and it was just an accident that these people got killed or paralyzed, you have to know that from a medical perspective, that's bullshit. They know those weapons are potentially lethal and that they shouldn't be used in certain settings, especially as what happened recently in the United States, shooting this guy in the top of the head with a impact weapon. So, yeah, I am obligated to occasionally talk about medically related topics with social implications or political topics that have medical implications. So none of us can or should try to escape that reality. Again, look at what's going on in the United States, and I could use examples from other countries, believe me. But I'm an American. I pay taxes in the U.S. I can certainly comment, and that's where I lived most of my life. So I can certainly comment on that. But if you look at what's going on in the United States, again, like right now in October, end of October of 2025, with the government shutdown, you're about to have 1.3 million people not get a paycheck for their jobs. So again, is that a political construction, like kind of intentional demolition, so to speak, or intentional collapse of the society? Hell yeah, that's what it is. And you can blame the Republicans or you can blame the Democrats, but it is the reality. The government is shut down. They're not paying their employees. You got 1.3 million people who are about to not get a paycheck. The average American has less than $500 in the bank, So when these people, 1.3 million people, in addition to all the trickle down from that, but when 1.3 million people don't get a paycheck and they only have $500 in the bank and they got to pay rent, if they have credit card reserve, then they have to fall back on their credit cards to the extent that they can. And then they're paying 20 up to 30% interest on those credit cards. So a government shutdown for a few months that forces people to live their lives off of credit cards, paying 20 to 30%, that's going to impact these people for years into the future. So, and obviously in the United States, everybody knows that medical expenses are one of the biggest expenses in the United States. So commonly people have to pay $1,000 a month for their mandatory health insurance that does absolutely nothing for them. It certainly doesn't include anything to make them healthy, and it doesn't even cover anything other than like major illness and accidents. So basically, anybody who doesn't want to, or says I shouldn't, or can't talk about politics as connected to health and other topics in medicine, they're just fooling themselves. And I don't fool myself. Those things are medically relevant, and I talk about them. If it seems a little more social or political, I talk about it on HealthyThinking.substack.com. If it seems more clinical, but with a political tinge to it, then maybe I'll put it on Inflammation Mastery, where again, on that page, I try to keep it more strictly clinical. But just because a person disagrees with my conclusion doesn't mean I'm wrong. It just means they don't. Maybe I am wrong and maybe they're right, or maybe I'm saying the truth and they don't want to hear it. But the fact is, and you all know this, politics impacts health. Politics impacts medicine. Again, you want to talk about it more? Looking at examples from the United States, all of the rainwater, air, and food in the United States is contaminated with glyphosate. Glyphosate is a mitochondrial toxin and it's a genotoxin. If you don't think that that's relevant, and if you don't think that that has a political source, you're just out of the game. So yeah, sometimes I talk about politics and social events. And again, I talk about it a little more freely on Healthy Thinking and a little more restrictedly or tightly on Inflammation Mastery. But again, I'm just trying to explain to you the differences between one and the other. If you've already joined Inflammation Mastery and you want to join the other one, then you can do that. You could discontinue one membership and start the other one. Or if you want to email me and say, hey, give me a sample, let me check out the other site, you can do that too. Or you can join Healthy Thinking from Inflammation Mastery and try to get the best of both worlds. A lot of the things I talk about on healthy thinking, like if it's architecture, or if it's a recipe, or if it's like a purely social commentary, or maybe even if it's like something from my own experience, like, hey, I just refused to sign a contract and here's why, and I'm trying to teach you how to read a contract. If it's a lot of times, if it's purely social like that, I'll put it on Healthy Thinking, and a lot of times it's for free. So again, if you're on Inflammation Mastery Substack and you want to join the Healthy Thinking Substack, a lot of those things are available for free, and you can kind of get the best of both worlds. And so I think that's pretty much the difference between the two. Inflammation Mastery Substack, I try to keep it mostly clinical, but again, anybody who thinks that medicine and health isn't influenced by politics and society, I mean, they're just fooling themselves, and that's not even a position worthy of respect. Your government, your paid-off, bribed politicians determine the walkability of your city. That determines whether or not you get out and socialize and go for a walk in the afternoon or not, because you either do or don't have sidewalks. I mean, look at the United States. A lot of even major cities don't even have sidewalks. So in terms of walkability, it's almost impossible. You're walking in the traffic. So, and that happens everywhere. It happens when we lived in Miami, we saw it everywhere there. I grew up in Texas, especially outside of, sometimes within Houston, which was obviously developed, so-called developed. But a lot, I grew up in one of the suburbs of Houston, Texas, called Missouri City. We didn't have sidewalks out there. So again, a lot of things that become health outcomes or disease outcomes have social and political contributions. So, I mean, anybody who can't acknowledge that and see that isn't even in the game of really trying to understand things. So, again, I think I've explained it reasonably well enough. Healthy thinking is, like I said, it's everything. Usually what I'll do, even if it's a clinical topic, usually what I'll do is create the work, like a video, for example. I'll post it on Healthy Thinking. I'll look at it again a few times, sometimes like 3 or 4 times. And then I'll post it. Once it's kind of edited and cleaned up and make sure the typos are corrected and things like that, then I'll post it on Inflammation Mastery Substack. So again, Healthy Thinking is a little bit more of everything, and it's a little more spontaneous. And Inflammation Mastery Substack is definitely more refined and more filtered. One of the things, and this will maybe be my last example. I've covered everything reasonably well enough. But I am, for example, personally rereading Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Many years ago, I read the Kaufman translation, as you can see here. This is a new version, new for me, it's 40 years old at least. But this is a translation from the other major translator of Nietzsche's work. His name was R.J. Hollingdale. And they're both German translators who focused on Nietzsche, but other philosophers as well, like Goethe and Schopenhauer. So these are both respectable translations. But one of my pet projects on Healthy Thinking Substack is to go through these again and kind of pull out the good and the bad and the insights, basically, and tell a little bit of the story. So again, if you're interested in topics like that, Healthy Thinking Substack is where I talk about those things, and you're welcome to join that, in addition to being on the Inflammation Mastery Substack. So hope you're all doing well. That's the quickest summary I can give you with a few relevant examples. But again, I think that many of us, even if we had, let's say we had good parents, even if we have business experience, even if we, I don't know, whatever else, studied architecture or studied music, let alone nutrition, health, medicine, functional medicine, I provide a broader range of reflections and summaries and experiences on healthy thinking. It's kind of my everything polymath website. And if you want to follow that, you're certainly invited to do so. Hope you're all doing well. Take care. Bye-bye. And thank you for all of you who are free subscribers, and especially the paid subscribers. This is the last thing I wanted to say. A lot of times we all have options in how we spend our time, right? But if I know that I have paid subscribers, then, if I'm in the balance of trying to decide how I'm going to spend my time or how I'm going to spend my day, or if I'm going to research something or write a summary, if I say, hey, I've got these subscribers who have paid and I need to provide them something, or it's worth the effort, or hey, people need to know about this. I'm happy to have free subscribers, but the paid subscribers are the ones who keep me going, basically. Because I'm thinking to myself, they paid for a cup of coffee this month. I'll spend time to make this video. Typically, not always, but if I do a spontaneous video on a health topic, like iron overload, vitamin D, something that I know really well. Let's say I do a 1 hour video spontaneously, or a 30-minute video. Usually the time to edit that, process it, produce it, rearrange it, make it graphically enhanced, usually that takes double the time of whatever the video was. So if it's a 1 hour video, it usually takes me 2 hours to process it, and then another hour at least to review it once, if not more than once. So a 1 hour video becomes 4 hours of work. And the same thing with a 30-minute video, and that's for the spontaneous stuff. The spontaneous stuff that needs some level of polish. If it's a professional level presentation, like I have done for microbiome, vitamin D, N-acetylcysteine, a lot of the functional medicine conference videos that I've posted, that can be weeks and legitimately into months of work to prepare, a really solid slide deck, do high-level soundproof recording, and then do sound editing to make sure we don't have any background noise and things like that. That can be 10x. So, a casual video like this one, assuming I don't screw it up, I'm just going to process it and post it because I know it's good enough. A casual video of some level of importance, like a clinical topic or a medical topic, is going to take me 4x whatever you see. So if you see 1 hour, it costs me at least 4 hours of time. And if it's a higher level, it's easily 10x or 9x. So on a higher level presentation, and that may not even include the prep work that went into creating the slide deck. So I remember, again, for the NAC video that I did a few years ago, I think that I spent at least 2 months just looking at research to prepare that. So it was 2 months, and then at least a solid week to get that video recorded, edited, sound checked, and it was a 2-hour video. So at least, let's say, 9 weeks of work for a 2-hour video. So again, like I said, for the paid subscribers, thank you. You're the reason that I tip the scales in favor of producing more information, because sometimes I think to myself, oh well, maybe I should focus on something else. But if I've got paid subscribers, then I say to myself, no, you gotta deliver for the people who are buying your coffee this week or this month. So I think the subscriptions are about typically it's about $5 with the discount for the full year, but it comes out to like $5 a month. So I can go through $5 worth of coffee in a morning, believe me. So for those of you who support that effort, I appreciate you, and you are the reason why I produce a bit more, whereas I could say, I'll just go for a walk. So again, thank you all. Hopefully this provides sufficient explanation about the topics I just talked about. But hope you're all doing well. Take care. Bye-bye.